Welcome to the Alternative Review, your new favourite place for news and stuff that isn't news. I'm Adam John Butterworth, and this is Ollie Ballard and Jake Bewley. In the news this week, the UK general election has become increasingly close after Labour has seen a last-minute surge in support after a number of TV debates. Will the Conservatives be regretting their choice of a snap election? Donald Trump, the president, backs out of the Paris Agreement, much to the dismay of climate change activists. Signing the agreement was called a monumentous achievement by mainstream media, and President Trump leads an ever-divided America. In other news, NHS waiting times lead to the death of a cancer patient because he was denied a bed due to a shortage of beds. A horrible terror attack on London Bridge happened yesterday. It left 7 people dead in the wake of an election. Every major political party has agreed to stop campaigning, besides UKIP, who say that this is exactly what the terrorists want. And finally, Nigel Farage, a Russian spy. Nigel Farage named as a person of interest in the Trump-Russia investigation. So, first of all, shall we delve into the Trump-Paris agreement? Now, Ollie, you've admitted you're not sure what this is, so we'll just go over a intro, quick brief. So this is what I like to call the mainstream perspective. So, in December 2015, 195 countries, that's all the countries in the world bar for 2, made a commitment to work together, creating a number of goals to cut their carbon emissions until 2030. And remember that date, 2030, because it's important. And part of the Paris Agreement is that after 2030, they would have much, much harsher cuts to the climate emissions. Just to put into place, start to work by November 4th, 2016. And there have been a number of controversial things under the agreement. Billions of dollars in foreign aid from the richest countries to the poorest countries. And then President Trump said on Wednesday that he will be backing out of the deal, but he can't back out of the deal until 2020. Because that's the day after his first term as president. So under the Paris Agreement, he's not actually allowed to leave until the first term has ended. The Paris Climate Agreement was to limit global temperatures from rising above 2 degrees Celsius, right? Above industrial levels by the year 2100. And France, Germany, and Italy have sent a letter to the president to say that they are very unhappy with the decision. UK didn't sign it, but we've heard that Theresa May has got in contact with President Trump personally. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau called it deeply disappointing, and Japan's foreign minister called it regrettable. Now, the 2 countries, and this is kind of important, the 2 countries that didn't want to get involved are Syria and Nicaragua. Now, Nicaragua, this is really interesting, said they didn't want to become a part of the Paris Climate Agreement because they thought it was too weak, that it wasn't enough. Why people are upset about the fact that Trump left specifically. And I watched a video. Have you heard of the series Adam Ruins Everything?
Yes.
Do you remember when that used to be funny, Jake? It's not funny anymore.
It really isn't,
it's too
actually.
political, but
it's very political now.
I watched it, and I was really wanting facts and figures, right? And there was no facts, no figures. But the argument that the video made was we need the Paris Climate Agreement because it's a first step towards real changing climate change. It's a real step. And it's important that all these countries have got together. Sorry, carry on.
You know what I don't get, right? I don't know what the purpose is of it. But when, so Trump backs out. When he did that, do you reckon it might have gone through his head, all of the other countries that signed this and stuff, they're going to be unhappy with my decision to do this, and so when he backs out, all of these countries are like, I know what we'll do. We'll write him a really strongly worded letter talking about how dissatisfied we are. That will show him. That will show him good and proper, won't it?
Yeah. What do you think, Jake? Why do you think that always happens, doesn't it? Stuff like this.
Well, the thing is, I sort of agree with Trump on this one. I think
I'm from the sounds of it, I think I might do as well.
That's so interesting.
What do you think? Do you disagree?
I'm on the fence about it, but carry on. Sorry, what were you saying?
I wouldn't say that I'm massively. I haven't looked. I'll admit, like Ollie, I haven't really looked into this that much, but from what I do know, I'm kind of on his side. I mean, you don't see. No, I won't go there. Actually, I won't go there. But I've heard a lot. I've heard a lot about the state of the kind of scientific climate to do with, well, climate change, and I do think that a lot of people act like it's all done and dusted, like we need to do something about it. But if I'm honest, I'm not sure that that's actually the case. And I know this is getting away from the whole Trump thing, but I think this is the basis that puts me on the side of maybe Trump isn't really doing a bad thing.
What do you mean?
Us. Like
what's all done and dusted?
Like the idea that it's like climate change is real and it's like it's happening as a result of human actions, right? Of like fossil fuels and things like that. I heard a very compelling study that said when the Industrial Revolution was going on and coal power was booming in the UK, the atmosphere dropped a couple of degrees, which is exactly the opposite of what you would expect to happen. Mm-hmm. Now, look, I'm not putting this out as I understand that I'm coming in straight away as a conspiracy theorist to most people, and that's honestly that's honestly not what I'm about. But like, I do think that people have the conclusion has been jumped to by a lot of people. I think the science isn't all entirely there.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's going to possibly be a running theme with lots of different topics with this podcast, isn't it?
Already upsets people who would listen.
Yeah. It's called the alternative review, isn't it? So yeah. I don't know. I do think that one thing that gets me as well is I just think people want whatever excuse they can to just hate on Trump. And I think he says stupid things sometimes. Some things he says I agree with, some things he says I disagree with. But people just want to sensationalize everything sort of vaguely negative about something that Trump does. When historically, America has always been a country that doesn't seem to care that much about its carbon emissions. It's not just Trump. It's almost like a characteristically American thing.
Yeah.
It's and they target Trump for that, but it's nothing new that America it does that.
I would say that Obama was probably the first president to really, really make a case and make policies surrounding climate change.
I could to back up that point. You would imagine the amount of people that have jumped on Trump for this.
Yeah.
Does not compare to the amount of people who have actually cared about it in the past. Before Trump made a stride in this area.
Well, that's interesting.
Exactly.
It's funny because I saw somebody tweeted Trump and he said, how many retweets for you to get to sign yourself back into the Paris Agreement?
Right, yeah.
He said 18 million.
What did he say?
No. He said 18 million retweets, right? And I was thinking, oh, well, he might get it, because it's such a controversial issue. How many do you reckon he got?
Couldn't possibly tell you.
How many?
Well, last time I saw it, he got about 900.
900 retweets?
Yeah.
That's mental. The President of the United States, 900 retweets.
No. It was the guy who tweeted him.
Oh, the guy who tweeted him got
So the
900.
president... No, yeah, he got 900 retweets, but the president said, you need 18 million before I will I will say I'm not going to leave.
That's interesting. That's...
Yeah.
Because I was going to say that if it was Trump that got the 900, you could kind of expect that because the people who are going to be opposing him aren't going to be actually following him on Twitter. But given that it's a guy it's on his post, the guy who was coming to him, it's a bit odd. You would expect some more, I'd imagine.
Yeah. Are you guys ready for a different perspective on the Paris Agreement now? Because I found some stuff that I was really shocked at, actually.
Go for it.
So you hear, this is like an alternative perspective. You hear words thrown around it. Like when I was researching it, I heard this phrase. It was the jewel in Barack Obama's crown of his presidency, and obviously like monumental achievement and stuff like that. Now, one reason why people are upset is that it's really similar to something called the Obama Clean Energy Plan, and you'll see what I mean by that. So, if you apply the model that the UN uses, then all of the sanctions that were put in place under the Obama Clean Energy Plan would decrease the rate of temperature rise. So, not decrease the temperature, but the rate at which it's rising by 0.057 degrees Fahrenheit, right? Which would delay any serious effects of global warming by only 8 months.
Oof.
2100. Okay. Now remember that, because that's like a really interesting precedent for the Paris Agreement, and that's why I said what Nicaragua said was so important. So under the Paris Climate Agreement, and this is it, assuming that all of the countries involved keep all of the sanctions that they've suggested, because they get to set their own. If all of the countries did it, which would be a UN first, then they estimate that by the year 2100, it would cut the rate of rise of the temperature by 0.3 degrees Celsius, right? Which is 11% of its goal, because they wanted to lower the whole thing by 2 degrees Celsius, but this would only get it to 0.3. Okay, and it would delay any serious effects of global warming by just 4 years. But in the meantime, so this is it. So this is until the year 2100, we would delay the effects of global warming for 4 years. In the meantime, it would cost $1 to $2 trillion a year, based on an estimation from Stanford and the Asian modeling exercise, which means it would end up costing over $100 trillion to save the Earth from serious climate problems for 4 years.
For 4 years. So it's a waste of money and time.
Basically, I mean, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
And that's why I think Nicaragua may have been a bit wise about this, which is something nobody would have seen coming.
That makes a lot of sense, to be honest. I mean,
yeah, I mean, you can't use the at least it's a step in the right direction argument for that, can you? Like, if it's costing that amount of money for that little, that sort of little of a benefit, then I mean,
it's a step in the wrong direction, really. Yeah. I mean,
it's
not as if we don't have an economical crisis as well as an ecological one.
Yeah.
Well, they estimate with $100 trillion, you could feed everybody on Earth, give access to clean water for everybody on Earth, and probably spend a lot of money that would go towards curing Malaysia as well. Not Malaysia. Curing malaria.
Oh, dear.
Well, there's malaria in Malaysia, so you would be curing Malaysia of malaria.
Yeah.
Now, this is why Trump left specifically. Now, this might blow your mind a little bit. I was a bit like, what? So the sanctions put in place because of the Paris Climate Agreement it would take away from America 400,000 jobs. So 400,000 jobs would be lost. The average American family of 4 would be $20,000 worse off a year, and American energy prices would rise by 20%. And Trump called it unfair because China is the world's biggest polluter, by a lot, by the way. And basically, China has pledged that they're not going to change anything about their policy.
Yeah.
And they're paying less money in 18 countries as well. So they're the chief polluter, but they're paying less than the top 15 countries, which I kind of get.
This was the thing that I wasn't going to go into, actually. The fact that China have said they're not going to do absolutely anything about it, and they're the biggest polluter.
Yeah.
So in this, I mean, as you've explained it just now, with the crazy conspiracy theory about global warming aside, I'm with Trump.
Even if you put your tinfoil hat aside, you still stand with Trump.
Tinfoil hat off, I still stand with Trump.
It's just, even when you see it in the media as well, the concern of the people that are sort of creating all of this information and throwing it out in all of our faces, their concern is not the well-being of the environment.
Yeah.
It's a bash Trump fest. That's all it ever was. That's what it was during the presidential election, and nothing's changed about that. It's all about just demonizing Trump. You know,
But as well, I agree there are definitely some negatives to Trump that do need to be out in the open and do need to be
yeah,
talked about. Like I agree with you that he is and I think that's proven through studies that he's disproportionately negatively covered by the media. But on the other hand, it's a good thing that he is, because I think every president should be held up to the same amount of scrutiny as Trump has.
to a degree, I think. But like, so it's when across the pond watching the presidential election, and if you just looked on the face of it, at all the media you know that was being produced at the time, you'd be like, well, Trump's obviously going to lose.
Yeah.
Turns out, like, pretty much half the country are voting Trump.
Brexit as well.
It's they should be harsh in the way that they evaluate the leadership, but in terms of the media, it's better to be representative of the true state of affairs, isn't it?
What do you guys think about the fact that 80% of American evangelicals voted for Trump? 80%. That's a huge.
And that, yeah, I can understand it.
Yeah.
Because currently, I think one of the biggest political tools that is used is just liberalism. It's just being so open-minded. The more open-minded you are, the more sort of demographics you can appeal to and stuff like that. And it's not something that's really consistent with Christian values, is it?
No.
Yeah, there was definitely a real backlash to liberalism in the Christian community, but also I saw there was I heard some news about a particular like demonic ritual type deal going on with Hillary Clinton. I don't know if you guys heard about this.
Is that the pizza shop thing?
I'm not sure. I don't remember any pizza shop business. I mean, it was a while ago. Obviously, it was in the election, last year.
Yeah.
But and I mean, I can't imagine that had no effect. And whether that's true or false, if it reached, a Christian all the way in the UK, you can bet that the evangelicals in America had the field day with that.
What's this?
Yeah.
What was that about?
You might know more about it than I do, Adam.
What? Well, I'm thinking about Pizzagate, which you said it didn't have to do with, so I'm not sure.
I don't know. Well, there's a particular person related strongly to the Clinton Foundation, who was exposed as being involved in kind of demonic activity.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I cannot go into the detail because what I was told back then, I can't remember, and I don't have the information in front of us. But
That's interesting.
I mean, as I say, if that kind of information could reach me, it can reach people in America.
See, I mean, that's the kind of thing that it wouldn't necessarily get picked up and taken very far in the mainstream media, but someone who's a Christian is just going to hone in on that, aren't they?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
At that point, as soon as you hear such and such a public figure involved in demonic stuff, it doesn't matter how well covered it is so much in the mainstream media. I guess might not be sort of transmitted very very far or very very quickly, but that sort of information will get around, won't it?
Yeah. If it's Pizzagate, that was just before the election, John Podesta's emails were hacked by WikiLeaks and they were released. And in John Podesta's emails, some people thought that there was a secret code and the term pizza shop, and there was this, is that what you're talking about? And basically they were
something different, but I do remember what you're talking about here. Yeah.
This pizza shop was like a place where they would go to do. I mean, obviously, none of it has been proven, and this pizza guy lost his business. But this pizza shop was allegedly where John Podesta, Hillary's campaign manager, would go to do satanic rituals and all of this, and cheese was a code for this, and pizza was a code for this. Though I will admit there is a strangely disproportionate amount of pizza-related materials in his emails. Nobody should care about pizza that much. It should take up
I wonder if it's like feeling that something like that could be somehow linked to that whole thing where Hillary was like, it looked like there was a double, there was a double walking around for a couple of days, and they weren't sure if it was her or not.
Oh yeah. I
Don't you
that.
remember
And it
that?
was like a hairline
No.
was moved like 2 inches, and all this kind of weird stuff
She
going on.
she looked like totally different for like 2 days, and then
Yeah.
just like was and like that you could see off in the distance like obscure shots where like people were holding her up, like almost like she was barely even awake,
Yeah, there was
or
one that was
like
very clear where she full on collapsed. It was
she was being
when she had
carried.
Oh
Basically.
yeah, I've seen that video.
when she was going to get in the car, and there's a bit, and like you can clearly see that her legs just go completely slack. And then it was like a few days after that when this supposed replica started going around and doing speeches instead of her. I mean, this is conspiracy theory territory again, like big time.
Yeah, but it's like
Territory. This.
But I mean,
Yeah.
there was a lot of like
odd
pretty
things going
convincing
on.
evidence.
Well, I'll tell you
I'm
what.
saying
I've
she's
got-
a lizard. That's what I think.
Yeah, she's a
Al-
lizard.
allow me, humor me for a second. Allow me to take
Yeah.
the Trump-Paris agreement to a more philosophical place. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you tell me what you think about this, because this was, for me, the one thing about the Paris Agreement. And like I say, I'm totally divided on climate change. I have no idea where I stand, and I'm totally divided on whether Trump should have left. I don't really know, but this really made me think. So I've called this ethical problems. With Trump leaving, an increase in CO2 emissions correlates almost directly with the rate of technological innovation in a society, right? So theoretically, if you cut emissions, then you
Yeah.
should have a decreased rate. And there's another thing. There's a theory, and then this theory is very interesting, and I could kind of see why it would be true. There's a theory that climate change sanctions are deliberately preventing poor countries from having their own industrial revolutions, right? And what I mean by that is 1.2 billion people in the world, 1.2 billion, still don't have access to electricity. And the UN estimates, this is what made me think twice about it. The UN estimates that directly 140,000 deaths annually every year because of climate change. But biofuel, which is obviously, countries are encouraged under climate change sanctions to make biofuel, directly kills 190,000 people. So that's more instantly. Climate change sanctions in this instance have killed more people than climate change in this instance. And so at the moment, it could be drawn that more people could be killed because of climate change sanctions and climate change at this moment in time. Obviously, as time progresses, climate change gets worse, global warming gets worse. That'll change. And as obviously... as our renewable energy technology improves as well. So here's my thought I want you guys to ponder for a second. Could it be that climate change policies have a lot in common with the worst elements of capitalism? That is, that people with the least are hurt the most today, so that people with the least can have a better life tomorrow.
That's deep.
Would that be a correct policy? Do you think if that was the sort of trade off that that they was going for?
If I thought that would be ethically
Well,
right.
Yeah, no, yeah, so the trade off, so like making poorer people's lives worse so they can be better later on down the line. I guess it depends. It depends how drastically you're thinking. Does it actually tangibly? Which poorer people are we talking about?
Currently, so like I said, biofuel production, and that's all in third world countries. Biofuel production directly kills more people than.
Yeah, so in terms of the actual industry of that production, I don't know. It's an interesting one because the production of biofuel is funny. People raving about how we need to be producing biofuel. Do you know how much land is required to produce biofuel? Like that sort of gasoline that they make out of stuff like that.
Yeah, I know that's biofuel.
You need a ridiculous amount of land to actually sustain that level of production. So it's almost like they want the biofuel production and everything like that, but not if it means actually like having to have that industry and like buy all that land and put it in the US. They put it in these third world countries where they can buy the land cheap and get cheap labor and things like that.
You'd be much better building farms there.
Like if all of the world's if all of the world's fuel was biofuel, we wouldn't have enough space for things like agriculture. That's how much land you're talking. Like it to make like a barrel of biogasoline is like a huge amount of land.
The other thing that we've got to consider with this kind of issue, the whole question that Alan brought up really is, does the end justify the means scenario? And I think from a Christian perspective, well, there's a lot of discussion to be had, because on the one hand you could definitely say that God is a believer in the end justifies the means ethos, and that he allows suffering to exist in the world because he knows that, you know, it'll give people it has to exist to allow people to choose good over evil, and you know, all the other reasons that go into why suffering exists in the world, and he allows it to happen. But then on the other hand, we similarly should be more caring about the immediate and instant needs of the people who are in need, than caring about where we've been commanded to be good stewards of the earth. We are commanded much more strongly to take care of other people directly.
Yeah,
I would argue that perhaps the way in which God goes about things, I wouldn't say that is a matter of the end justifying the means. I mean, as like as an analogy, if I commit a crime, if I murder someone and go to prison for that murder, the ends haven't justified the means. You know, the means were still unjust. I've just been punished for it. So in the way that God allows evil to be to happen on the earth, for us to make that choice, the end doesn't still justify the means. The means are still unjust. It's just they've been paid for, they've been punished, or you know.
That is.
I mean, yeah. Now we're getting into literally the deepest and most difficult part of Christianity, aren't we? Which is, why suffering? Essentially, why would a living God allow suffering? I feel like we're almost swerving off track. Yeah, it's I would say it's the hardest question. If somebody turns to you and says, "Well, if God is real, why would He let my son die or something?" You can't answer that question.
It's emotionally charged straight from because every human being, it's a part of human existence is to have experienced suffering at some point, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well,
so it resonates with all of us, doesn't it?
Let me ask the question from another perspective. Are the people? I mean, this is a huge issue. I mean, this brings up the whole ideology of the political left and the political right. Are people today worth less than the people of tomorrow?
Oh,
surely not.
No, I think to answer that, you've got to ask what determines someone's worth.
That's a very good question.
My perspective, and I'm guessing from yours as well, that if you ask me what determines someone's worth, what determines my worth, the first answer that comes into my mind is the value that was placed on that person's head.
Mm-hmm.
The price, even the price that was paid for that person. Yeah. So no, because obviously when Christ died on the cross, he was paying for people that weren't born yet. You know, back then when he did that, he was doing it for people that were alive at the time and people that weren't alive yet. So already you've got equal value, don't you?
The same man paid the same ransom for each of us.
Somebody has to, in this analogy though, and in the topic of climate sanctions and just capitalism in general, somebody has to suffer though. That's the problem. Like, specifically, these climate sanctions directly hurt the people who have the least in society today. But if you believe climate change to be true, then that will impact the people of tomorrow. So somebody in this analogy has to get the bomb.
Here's the thing, though, right? They do directly hurt people in poverty today, but they don't have to. The thing is, people like politicians who have identified that jumping on the climate change being green bandwagon, they might push that agenda, right? Whether it's right or wrong, they push that agenda, and it is partly for people's approval. They'll push the agenda of climate change, and back with the biofuels thing, they'll push that agenda as long as they aren't the ones paying any sort of price for it. So you end up with the biofuel production being, being set up in third world countries and stuff like that. I'm sure a lot of these of different countries don't really pay much attention to their carbon footprint, really.
Yeah.
I mean,
well,
you don't see them flying in like economy class on airplanes, do you?
That's the other thing. I mean, all these celebrities and stuff who are talking about what an idiot Trump is, they probably spend more on jet fuel than most people would in their whole lifetime that they would in a single film shoot. And you need to remember, do you remember Bono? Bono was mental on climate change. He once actually paid for a plane ticket because he forgot a hat, and he paid for a plane ticket that somebody would take his hat to him in a different country. I don't feel like that person has a lot of legitimacy when it comes to lecturing people about climate.
Already he's made every climate change sort of thing that he's ever pushed completely invalid just in that one thing.
Yeah.
And even if he comes to understand that was a silly thing to do, and that's not, that's detrimental to the environment, everyone will still remember that he did that for a hat.
It happened with
have to move on
as well.
Yeah, DiCaprio's the same.
DiCaprio took a private jet to a speech that he was given about climate change.
Yeah,
that's
so silly.
So we're gonna have to move on, guys. We've been talking about this for ages now. Sorry about that. Now we move from Trump leaving the Paris climate change. We move from a depressing topic to an incredibly depressing topic: the London terror attack on Saturday night. 7 people were killed, dozens were injured. Police were called when they got news of a white van that ploughed into pedestrians on London Bridge at 9:58 on Saturday night. The van then continued onto a nearby borough market where 3 attackers emerged and carried out multiple stabbings at nearby pubs and restaurants. Armed police had arrived and shot the attackers dead within 8 minutes of being called. 48 people are being treated at 5 hospitals, with 21 being in a serious condition. Have arrested 12 people thought to be in connection with the attack. Theresa May condemned what she called Islamist ideology and called it a perversion of Islam. She also said that there was a new trend in the threat that we face, that terrorism is breeding terrorism. And she said that there must be changes on 4 fronts. But before we get to that, just a quick recap. This is obviously directly after the Manchester bombing on the 22nd of May. In which Salman Abedi, a suicide bomber, killed 22 people, including 8 children, at the MEN Arena. 17 people have been arrested in connection with that. Abedi's sister claimed that he wanted revenge, that the motivation was that he wanted revenge for US airstrikes in Syria. However, he's also been connected to the number 1 ISIS recruit in Manchester, who goes by Abu Taka al-Butani, and his real name is Raphael Hosti, who is he's 25 years old. And this is obviously just a few weeks after the 22nd of March attack, in which 6 people were killed by the Houses of Parliament by Khalid Massoud. So, now, sorry to interrupt. What I want to think about is Theresa May's. This is what she's pledged: 4 changes to the way that we deal with, as she called, Islamist terror. So number 1, and I want to just go through it. You guys tell me what you think and what you think of them. Number 1, people who are drawn to Islamist extremism must be persuaded that Western values are superior. So what do you think about
that? I think there's an element of truth to that, but it's too sort of it's not, it doesn't go far enough, really, persuading people that Western values are superior. From my perspective, I think anyone who's a follower of the Quran needs to be persuaded that Christian values are superior.
I mean, I'm not being funny, right? But you said anyone who seems to be leaning towards radical Islamic values, right? Firstly, you need to identify these people, and secondly, you need to see where their influences are. If you're gonna try and
Yeah.
persuade someone out of an ideology as absolutely all-encompassing as Islam is, you need to find the imams that are teaching it to people.
Mm.
I mean, it's one thing to try and go after the occasional person that you actually find is leaning in that direction, but I think it's a much more important task to seek the people out who are
The
actually
head off the
teaching it to
snake.
people. Exactly.
Yeah, and something again. It's like I can't remember what it was I mentioned, but it's linked to this. Um, it sort of annoys me. I don't know if it should. When I as soon as this happens, Theresa May condemns this.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that sets my mind at ease. For a second, I was thinking, I don't understand. And then you hear of loads of tweets that go on from different world leaders. Oh yeah, I condemn this.
Waiting for the day when they all come out and say, "Yeah, this is the way we want it to be."
Yeah, it's silly. It's they're using this awful thing as some means of like publicizing themselves, like publicizing the fact that they're like against killing people.
Yeah.
You don't need to say you shouldn't have to say, oh yeah, I condemn terrorism.
Yeah, I never really thought of that.
Why do you need to say that? I condemn this. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, it's kind of similar to this whole like as soon as there's a terror attack, you always read the same memes that say like, "We will carry on as if nothing happened. We will stand together," and it's kind of like, so what?
That's the other thing I was going to get onto. Talking about solidarity. Oh, London and its solidarity. London won't be stopped. Well, it doesn't really matter because, like, how many people have died? It doesn't matter. The solidarity of London is irrelevant when people have been mowed down.
Yeah.
Families have been mowed down on the street. Like, children have been blown up. And all
Yeah.
we could talk about is the solidarity that we have.
Yeah,
Keep swinging an axe at a tree
Yeah.
if the tree
Like,
doesn't
it's-
fight back.
It's almost selfish, like that these people have died in horrible ways, and all we can talk about is that we're gonna hold together and that we're gonna make it through it.
yeah.
And
It's I think it's kind of a changing in culture as well, because if you remember, there's the film Doctor Strange. There's a line in Doctor Strange that I just think is so unbelievably stupid, and it's one of the he's got like a bald lady who teaches him stuff, and then when the bald lady dies, he's like all sad and stuff, and then she says to him, "Don't be sad for me because death is what makes my life meaningful." And I was like, no, it's not. Imagine telling that to one of these parents who lost
Yeah.
one of the kids. Oh, don't worry, death is what
Yeah.
makes life
now
meaningful.
their life is meaningful.
Yeah, exactly. It's so
ridiculous.
unbelievably stupid. And I agree with you that we live in a culture now where the way we respond to Islamist terror is just totally wrong. Absolutely wrong. The way that all the virtue signaling you see doesn't help anybody, and then the people who are really, I believe, helping are the people that are the most condemned. You know what I mean? Like if you tweeted, "We need to have a serious conversation about Islam and why these attacks are happening," what do you think would happen? You'd probably get absolutely vilified. Think
Yeah.
about as well. Trump said, "We've got a problem with
Yeah.
Islamic terror." That's what he said, and what happened?
He was vilified. Yeah, and it's so clearly just a propaganda tool to get people to calm down. When like we go on like some maximum security thing, and then like a few weeks later, this is able to happen. They didn't pick this up somehow.
Yeah.
And
That's the thing.
there's-
Sorry, yeah, go on.
there's no mention of like, oh wow, it's kind of odd that we didn't pick this up. It's all like, oh don't worry, London will carry on. Like as though London was going to do anything else. What was everyone going to quit their job or like just
Yeah.
stay inside for a few months?
Yeah.
You've still got to go to work. It's
Yeah.
not. It's barely even through choice that London carries on. It's just the way the world works, and it's not any different from the way any other city in the world would do it.
One thing I said to my sister about this was, I have a younger half sister. She's about 8 years old, and one of her friends was actually at the Arena Grande concert. So I was especially freaking out about it, and it made me especially angry afterwards. And but one of the things is that one thing I said to my sister is that nothing will change, because at the end of the day they do not care. If this whole thing of solidarity, a terrorist does not care if you carry on like everything's normal. It's not on his prerogative.
It has no effect. Yeah.
As Islamist extremists, if you think about it, this is just my opinion, Islamist extremists aren't terrorists, not really. They don't care about causing terror. That's not on their prerogative. Although Muhammad did say in a hadith, I have been made victorious with terror. But Islamic terrorists don't care about scaring you. That's not on their prerogative. They care
about killing you.
Yeah, they only care about killing as many people as possible. That's it. That's how they get into heaven, they believe. That's their ideology. Kill as many people as possible, and if you get killed killing people, then you go to heaven. Standing
and it's almost
together
like
doesn't do anything.
We're like sort of reinforcing this idea that our biggest tool as a society is to have solidarity and to carry on despite these things that happen, rather than to actually identify the root cause of the problem and stop it. Everyone's saying, despite all of this stuff that's going on, Islam is a religion of peace, right?
Yeah.
Peaceful Muslims and everything like that. But that is the one thing, alone, that one thing that everyone seems to think is, if you don't believe it, you're just a really bad person. It's stopping us from actually as a society getting anywhere near sort of fixing the issue.
It's like people refuse to believe that there's actually an ideology out there that's just evil. It's like a complete... People can't accept that that's actually a reality. Like, there's only differences in culture, and nothing is actually bad. It's purely just a result of moral relativism.
Yeah. What was it you said about what... It was like a perversion of Islam or something like that.
She said it was a perversion of Islam.
Yeah. What I want her to do is demonstrate to me how their actions are a perversion of Islam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You show us how this isn't something that's directly telling Muslims to do in the Quran.
Public figure, Sadiq Khan, all of these, he's one of the worst ones for talking about solidarity and like how Islam is a religion of peace. Just show me, just demonstrate that to me.
Well, it's actually funny you mentioned Sadiq Khan, because Donald Trump tweeted to Sadiq Khan after the terrorist attack, because Sadiq Khan says there is no reason to be alarmed, and Donald Trump tweeted him saying at least 7 dead and 48 wounded in terror attack, and Mayor of London says there is no reason to be alarmed. And I think that's exactly right, isn't it? That's exactly right. There is a reason to be alarmed, and one of the reasons is that we're not willing to confront this ideology.
It's all of it is damage limitation and calming people down. There's no reason to be alarmed. Rather than
it's so stupid.
Rather than sort of maybe thinking about preventative measures, to a degree. Propaganda would be an all right way to deal with the situation if it was done in a way that gave people a more preventative attitude.
I wish a public figure would come out and say that solidarity only makes sense if the whole point of the attack is to not make you solid anymore. And that's just not the case with Islamic terrorism.
Yeah. It's not a divide and conquer thing, is it?
No,
it's not.
It's we want to kill you. And every time that they kill someone, they win. It doesn't matter how solid you are after that. If they're still going to come back and kill you, it doesn't make a difference whether you're solid or not. Their objective it's been met. They've met their objective.
And I would say as well, if anybody does ever listen to this who really disagrees with us and thinks we're wrong, I highly, highly recommend that you actually buy a Quran and read it. Just read it. I've been reading mine for a number of weeks now, and I can absolutely guarantee you, I mean, don't take my word for it, like I say, read one for yourself. I can absolutely guarantee you that if I took pages of the Quran and put them up and said, look, Muslims are terrorists. Oh, I said that wrong. Look, these people who are terrorists, they are acting out as the Quran says they should act out. If I put that out, that would be considered hate speech, first of all. I would be considered encouraging extremism, but you can buy a Quran from Waterstones. Do you know what I mean? And I just, anybody who disagrees with these views, go read a Quran, I promise.
It's all of these people. It's a religion of peace. A religion of peace. How I don't know if it's something about being a Christian that I've learned since becoming one, but I can't understand the reasoning behind saying those things without actually knowing those things.
Mm.
What else does?
But guys, what about the Crusades?
What about the Crusades?
Exactly. This is the thing. This I was going to when I made the point about Theresa May demonstrating that it's a perversion of Islam. It's not hard to take the actions of the Crusades and things like and things like the IRA bombings and stuff like that, and demonstrate that it's not consistent with the teachings of the Bible.
Well, I mean,
It's not hard
I've
at
got
all.
one verse for you, and it's in. I'm trying to find exactly where it is in the Quran, but I've got one verse, and I think this pretty much sums up. If you disagree, if you think no, the hadiths, the Quran, all that Muslims are great people, it's just a misunderstanding. It's just a misunderstanding. Well, I've got a verse in the Quran that says, Allah's people live in Allah's way. They slay and are slain. And you can look it up. Go look it up. Anyway, let's move on to the second part of her 4 promises. 2, a clampdown on the safe spaces on the internet where terrorism breeds.
Well, I'm with her on that one. To be fair,
I don't know if I am.
Why is
The
that?
safe spaces on the internet where terrorism breeds. Where does terrorism breed on the internet?
Well, yeah. See that's the thing.
She means
so
like
vague.
chat room. Well, allegedly the 7 was it the 7/7 bombings? No, was it the Paris attack? Allegedly, in one of the Paris attacks, terrorists used PS4s to plan their attacks because the encryption software on PS4s was so good.
I mean, the thing is with that is there's a few points to make. First off, it just seems convenient that that one of the things they want to do to clamp down on this is to take away our freedom on the internet. You know, it seems like every opportunity the government gets, they want to take away a bit of freedom on the internet. And the second thing is clamping down on the way people use the internet isn't going to stop terrorists from communicating.
Yeah,
It's just not.
Mind. That's dumb. Actually, there's no way they could possibly have
I mean,
enough people or a smart enough algorithm to stop people from just being able to say whatever they want to anybody they want to.
Think about this, right? I would lay money. I think it would be more reasonable to assume this than not to assume this. All of the people involved in this recent attack knew each other quite well, probably met up face to face on a fairly regular basis, probably lived close to each other. So they probably planned it not on the internet. And if they didn't, you know, and then you monitor the way people use the internet, stop them doing that, they'll just meet up. We live in a fairly small country, you know. It's not hard to just meet up, to just drive to each other.
I'm kind of divided on the issue because, like at the end of the day, if they can read all the messages, if they will root out terrorists, and if they want to observe the internet, I don't care. I've got nothing to hide. That's fine. If it works, I don't care. But I'm worried that it will create the same issue the NSA have in America, and that's that they are surveilling so much information that stuff always just gets let through the cracks. I mean, I know that they do stop a lot, but that stuff always gets let through the cracks.
I mean, you could argue in that same sense that, you know, more stuff would get through the cracks if they weren't looking at any of the stuff. But
yeah, that's true.
I don't think it's reasonable to say that with any amount of staff, you will be able to actually prevent. I mean, you will stop some. Like, of course, you will stop some. But of all of the possible measures that you can put in place to prevent this type of stuff, is this the one that is really going to have the biggest impact? I'm skeptical of that. I don't know if that's.
I think I feel like it's an excuse to sort of carry out something that's been a goal of the governments for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many ulterior benefits besides prevention of terrorism that the government have for clamping down on people's use of the internet.
Like InfoWars sometimes, but in a nice way, in a kind way. So number 3, call for action at now. This one was a bit like, that's interesting. Call for action at home where extremism may be tolerated. And I think what she means by this is obviously the UN released a statistic that on average 1/4 of all Muslims think suicide bombings are sometimes or often justified. So it's the idea that 1/4 of all the Muslims in the world, according to the UN statistics, hold extremist views. And so obviously this is about call for action at home, trying to encourage mosques that are aware of this activity to actually do something about it. Because wasn't it something like 60% of Muslim, not Muslim, was it mosques? Can't remember. But it was 60% of mosques were asked if you knew of somebody who was planning a terrorist plot in your mosque, would you tell somebody about it? And they said no. So I was wondering, what do you guys think about that?
The first thing that Jake, what do you think?
What do I think?
Yeah,
I think it's more than a quarter. I think it's far more than a quarter of people who have extremist views. I would advise. I mean, I'm not. Now, to be fair, I'm not talking about necessarily Muslims within the UK. I'm talking about Muslims worldwide. There is a video by Ben Shapiro who goes through the highest populated Muslim countries in the world, as well as Western countries like the US and the UK, and basically points out the statistics of what percentage of people in these given countries hold this particular radical Islamic belief, and it's an incredibly high percentage. It's incredibly
I've seen
high.
that video as well. Yeah, it's a good video.
I think something. The whole thing as well seems like a distraction. It seems like it's a big distraction because if you get mosques to work towards sort of being discouraging towards terrorism and like helping us seek out terrorists, right, and all that, it doesn't stop words that are written in the Quran. It doesn't change what their holy book says. It's like if your kitchen's flooding because the tap's turned on, trying to prevent the flood of your kitchen by getting loads of buckets and filling the buckets up and throwing the buckets of water out the window rather than just turning the tap off.
That's true. Yeah.
Very accurate analogy. That.
Yeah. Now the last one. This is going to be interesting, and obviously we can't spend too much time on it. But so the fourth thing she states is a review of counter-terrorism strategy and laws, suggesting longer sentences for Islamic extremists. Islamic extremists don't care about long prison sentences. They're planning on dying. So, but my question to you guys would be: what do you think would be a good law to pursue to reform a UK counter-terrorism strategy and policy?
So I'd also make the point that UK prisons have become basically like a radicalization center for Islamic extremism.
This is what I was going to say as well.
Yeah, I was reading the facts about that. The facts are absolutely insane. Like in France, Muslims make up something like 3% of the population, but like 70% of the prison population. And in the UK, like Muslims make up something like 1.2%, but yet they make up 60% of the prison population. That's absolutely crazy.
The amount of people that are radicalized in prisons is ridiculous. It's absolutely mental. Giving them longer prison sentences isn't going to sort anything out. I think that it might be a bit. I'm just going to go ahead and say they need to ban the Quran. That's what I think. I think the Quran needs to be banned.
I disagree with you there.
You disagree?
Yeah, I absolutely disagree with you. Like, actually, shall we just take a quick second? We don't hate Muslims, okay? We have nothing against Muslims at all.
I don't hate Muslims.
No, we have nothing against Muslims. I think that the Islamic ideology as presented in the Quran is incompatible with Western society, but I don't hate Muslims. I just want to get that out of the way. Would you guys agree?
Yes.
I would rephrase it. I would say isn't going far enough. I think that the ideologies presented in the Quran are evil.
I was gonna say that. Yeah, it's not just they're
I think they're
incompatible.
evil.
As a believer in an absolute objective moral law, the
Yeah.
ideology in the Quran is evil.
I think I probably need to be more careful, actually, thinking about it now, to not sound like someone who hates Muslims.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But my opinion on the matter is that people are brought up, or now, as we're seeing in the prison system and otherwise, converted into Islamic ideology, and
Yeah.
are taught an ideology that is evil, and it's not necessarily their fault. It's not you can't control what family you're born into and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it steers people in a really evil direction, and it's every human being on the planet is capable of the evil atrocities that are committed in like these attacks, and the one in Manchester, the one before. Everyone's capable of that if they're in the same sort of circumstances, nurtured in that way.
Well, I just remember before you said about you think it should be banned. I disagree with you there, and one of the reasons is I don't think the Quran should be banned. I think what I think should happen, definitely laws against Islamophobia should be banned. I mean, obviously, laws against. I mean, you should be able to have a dislike of anybody you want legally. But what I'm saying is, and obviously, if somebody is targeting Muslims because they are Muslim, that person should go to prison. That's just stupid, and you shouldn't do that. What I'm saying is, we need to have a culture where we can freely criticize Islam, and there'll be no repercussions. I think that's all I want. I don't want to ban the Quran. I want to be able to go down the street and say, "This is what the Quran says."
With it. Yeah,
and nothing bad happened to me.
I was thinking about that today, actually, because my workplace, I'm surrounded by Muslim people, and I was thinking about at work that during a conversation about me being a Christian. Oh yeah, well I don't agree with the Bible or the ideologies, which I've had said to me a lot of times. I would be like, okay, well that's fine. Maybe we could talk about that, and perhaps I could convince you otherwise. If I said at work, I disagree with the ideologies of the Quran, I think I would lose my job.
Which is scary.
Yeah.
I mean, have you seen Canada's law about it as well? Canada's law is absolutely crazy. We live in a Jake, have you heard about it? Canada passed a law. I think it's called C-16. And basically, Islamophobia is illegal, and they use a real blanket term. So like Islamophobia can literally mean anything. If I walk down the street and I said, "Oh, sorry, I just think the Quran is a book of hate," you can seriously get in trouble. All right, so if I draw a picture of Muhammad, I could seriously I'm in danger of going to prison, and that's wrong. That's absolutely wrong.
Because then you're so, like, the whole not drawing Muhammad thing. That's a law of Islam, so they're almost forcing you to follow laws of Islam.
That is flat out just an exam in Islamic law.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That is actually doing better for the Islamist extremist cause than any of the standing together is. Like any of those laws are essentially implementing Sharia, aren't they? But anyway, we've really got to move on. This is kind of our last segment. Maybe not. No, probably. This is our last segment. So you might be thinking, what does this have to do with news at all? Now, Crash Bandicoot is releasing. Well, he's not releasing. There are 3 new Crash Bandicoot games coming out. It's a remaster called the Insane Trilogy. And basically, it actually opens up some very interesting philosophical discussion. And you'll have to trust me, because this year, not only have we seen a Crash Bandicoot remaster of 3 games that came out in the 1990s, but also we've seen the Assassin's Creed Ezio Trilogy remaster, the Uncharted PS3 games remaster, Prey remaster, and Sonic Mania remaster. And in terms of films, we know of 117 remakes that are in production, including Ace Ventura, Aladdin, Narnia, Flash Gordon, and Death Note, the Japanese anime. Now, Four Horsemen is a really, really good documentary, by the way. I recommend it to everybody. Four Horsemen explores this theory by a guy called Sir John Glubb, right? And he theorizes that every single society, every single civilization goes through 4 stages. So it starts with the age of pioneers. So that's courageous individuals with passion and vision who conquer new territories, and they start a new age of commerce. The age of affluence. And then he says, this is a critical juncture in a society. This is when things tend to go wrong. And this is really the start. It's not the start, but this is really at the beginning. This is when things start to go wrong. And it's usually because of cash, the flow of cash, greed, love of cash. And then we have the age of intellect, which is obviously an age of heightened scientific progression and technological advancement. And then he says, and then finally, the last stage before any society, whether it's Rome, whether it's ancient Greece, whether it's the Ottoman Empire, the age of decadence. People behave in a way that is just unsustainable. They consume more than they ever should. And they enter into an era of frivolity. We create. This is what he says happens. We create what he calls gladiator spectacles, and that's basically events that distract us, which he says in this society is like reality TV and stuff like that, stuff we can't look away. He also says debauchery and obsession with sex. These are all things that mark the ending of every single major society. And the reason why we have so many remakes is because we're just running out of ideas as a society. We're just getting to the point now where we really are on the way out. We've expanded our age of intellect and we're on the way out. So what do you guys think? Are we entering into the age of decadence?
I remember watching someone talking about how like all of these dead civilizations, like before they die out, you notice that all of their, like we've noticed that all of their art, like the men become sort of really effeminate in artwork and stuff like that, and like you start seeing a lot of sort of like decadence creeping in the artwork and in the sort of writings and things like that. And I think that is quite an interesting thing. Like the Romans and the Greeks were all into that sort of stuff.
You pose the question, are we entering into the age of decadence? I think we've been there for a little while.
Oh,
yes, so do I.
I
think, I mean, just look at the pride marches that you have all over the place.
Yeah,
that's enough for me to sort of be on Jake's. I think.
Well, one thing that's interesting is that this guy, what's he called? Sir John Glubb? Yeah, Sir John Glubb. He says he believed. Can you guess exactly when he said he believed the age of decadence began?
Oh, what country was he from?
Well, his name's Sir John Glubb, so I assume he's English, but
right, yeah, sure.
I don't really know.
Yeah,
I couldn't possibly say. I needn't have bothered asking the question because I've got no idea.
He died in Preston, Lancashire, and is from Mayfield, England.
I'll say.
So go on.
We entered into it like 1930s.
You think?
I reckon the 90s.
What do you think, Ollie?
I reckon
the noughties.
90s.
The 90s. He actually believed it was the year 1969. Because that was the year we went to the moon.
It's in the summer of 69.
Yeah. He believed that was the year we entered into the era of decadence for our society, and our doom is inevitable. And I think there's definitely an element of that. Like, have you seen those memes where it's like the year 2050 and it's like, I hope in the future we have flying cars, and then it's like cut to 2017 and then it's like first transgender lesbian opens up gay friendly cake bar and stuff like that.
Yeah. Right.
And I think it's and my favorite one is where it's like, I mean, I've got nothing against anybody who wants to identify as anything. I love you still the same, but like the city of New York now announces 72 genders and stuff like that. I just feel that it's absolutely representational of an era of decadence. Do you know what I mean?
It's going.
We're absolutely. we're at the point now where we have so much abundance that we are focusing on things, and the things that are the main talking points in society are so not important.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? To the grand scheme of things. And
It's funny.
What's your take?
We've got
Go on.
such an abundance of everything else that we're now looking for an abundance of things that we can't have an abundance of, like gender.
Yeah, true. And there's a guy called Dr. Brown who is a Christian, a Messianic Jew, and he wrote this book called Outlasting the Gay Revolution. And basically what he meant by that, during this time and this era when there's so much anti-Christian stuff in society, there's so many anti-Christian movements, and it's becoming increasingly more difficult to be a Christian. But his theory was that we as Christians would outlast it. And but the question is, would Christianity outlast it into a societal collapse? And what I mean by that is the only logical step now for everything to get worse until society collapses, or will things get better? What do you guys think?
I think everything will get worse.
Yeah, I don't think things are turning around anytime soon. I think, well, I mean, I'm gonna be honest about something. I think the end's coming pretty soon. I think it's getting about the stage where Christ's coming back, and so
Yeah.
I don't think it's gonna get any better until that happens.
I don't think we're that far off. I wouldn't be surprised if it was in my lifetime. Might not be, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. Well, I mean, depending on which view you take about the last days as well, you might not get to see it. We could potentially all be dead
bet
before
so,
anything
yeah.
happens.
Dead or alive?
It's a tough one. The outlook doesn't look good no matter how you cut the cake, does it?
No.
It looks glorious, mate. I can't wait.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But-
I know.
Like, I actually asked my German friend, do you think, who's a Christian, do you think Jesus would come back before this society collapses? Because all societies do inevitably collapse.
Yeah.
Or before, or in the next one. And then he, without skipping a heartbeat, was like, in the next one. And I was like, oh, so you think this society would collapse? He was like, yeah, absolutely. And I've never seen anybody so confident, but he was absolutely confident that it would be the next one. Not the third one, not the fourth one, but the next one specifically. And I was like, oh.
The next society? What do you mean the next one?
So-
I think I missed part of what you said.
So societies fall, and then new societies show up in their place. It always happens.
Oh, right. So
No
it'll be
matter
in a
what.
society
Our
after the
society will not
collapse of
last
this
forever.
one.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And actually, about the age of decadence, you guys might be interested. There's a bit in the Bible. I mean, if you're not a Bible believer, that's totally fine. But there's a bit in the Bible that says he will bring down any nation that rises up in the way that Babylon has. And obviously, Babylon in the Bible also becomes a synonymous term for just an incredibly sinful nation.
Mm.
I mean, now we're getting really tinfoil hatty. But the question is
Absolutely.
it that
not.
societies
Do
are
not-
doomed?
Do not equate prophecy in the Bible to tinfoil hattishness.
Oh, no. No, I'm not, but you know what it must look like. You know what I mean?
Yeah, to someone
like,
to someone who isn't a Christian.
Yeah. But what I mean is it that God, when societies get to be like Babylon, and that sex is everywhere, and that marriage means nothing, and that and that the poor inequality is absolutely off the chain, when a society gets like that, it can't sustain itself, and then it just falls apart? Or is it just that God then, as he promised in the Old Testament, brings down societies that get to that level, do you think? And in which
Bit
case,
of both, I reckon.
both. A little bit, yeah.
As it is, I think God in His providence sort of ensures that it happens, knowing full well that that's the only way it can happen.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you guys. Did you guys play Crash Bandicoot, by the way?
I have played it. It wasn't one of my go-to games.
I didn't play very much. I think I played like a first level on one of them.
5 years ago, Crash Bandicoot's getting a remaster. Do you know, by the way, it's getting a remaster into 4K?
Oh, right.
I'm not
But-
surprised.
It's not like a remaster where it's like, they're just going to re-import it, kind of.
Yeah.
But
Yes,
they've
new
literally
assets, I think.
rebuilt the whole thing from
Yeah.
scratch.
It's pretty cool.
The Oddworld games had that. And to be honest, the originals were better.
But at the
That's
same
just
time,
rose
I
tinted
don't think it's
glasses.
reflective of the fact that we're just spent on intellectual ideas
Well,
right now.
yeah, I've been saying for a while, like I'm sick of just films coming out that are just like remakes of stuff. It's like it's just they wanted another quick buck and they couldn't think of any ideas.
Yeah.
And this is going to sound really sad. Maybe the truth is that that's because the remakes are like echoes of the society before it was getting progressively worse. You know what I mean? Like nostalgia
Yeah,
is a bit more
yeah.
sinister.
Well, yeah, it's like the Star Wars thing. It just
Oh,
takes us
wow.
all back to our childhood, and that's why we like it.
I never actually thought of that. Yeah, nostalgia relies on the idea that the past times are perceived to be better than they are now.
Yeah, yeah. It's like I think we wouldn't like Star Wars half as much if the previous films didn't exist. You know, if
Yeah.
these new Star Wars films were just like a new thing,
That's true.
they wouldn't be
Yeah.
that popular. I don't think.
That's true.
It's just because I remember that when The Force Awakens came out, I didn't really like the film. I didn't enjoy the film, but just the starting credits. Just I felt really mint during those starting credits, just because of the fact that it was Star Wars starting credits and it was a new Star Wars film.
Yeah.
It was just not pure nostalgia.
One
Interesting,
thing
isn't it?
I'd like to, I mean, talking further about video games. There's something I thought I might bring up, seeing as we're going to be talking about video games. Is it seems like the industry now is really on a anti-religion high at the minute. I don't know if you've noticed. Did any of you guys see the Far Cry 5 trailer?
Yeah.
Yes, with the Last Supper thing going on.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's Christian cult, which is, I mean, and it, by the way, it is a conservative Christian cult as close as you could get to actual conservative evangelicalism in the US without actually calling it as such.
And I know I know there's like a pastor character who's like part of the resistance against the cult, but that's all I've
Yeah.
heard.
Yeah, he.
Playing that
About
game.
Well, that's the thing. I was wondering if you were going to go straight, because this, I mean, this is going to be really controversial, but I basically believe there is no increase in Nazism in today's society. I think it's a total myth. But what I'm saying is, if you make them basically Nazis, the enemy in the game, and then you build it on this whole cultural narrative of who Nazis are supposed to be, that far right-wing Christians are these horrible, evil people, and they're all hiding behind doors and things like that, and that's why the enemy in this game. If you consider how many people identify as Christians in America, surely that would be a stupid idea. Wouldn't you be just shooting yourself in the foot? Do you know what I mean? It feels like they're trying to sell the game to a very fringe group.
To the point where the whole, the bad guys are Russian thing is a bit outplayed, and they can't have the bad guy being a Muslim because that's too racist.
Yeah.
I think it's this whole thing of just playing the devil's advocate, of like, oh well, there's Christian extremists knocking around, sort of thing.
Sorry,
But, so you think it's also part of the age of decadence then? Like, oh, Russia's done, this is done. Oh, let's just do Christians, and then eventually...
to a degree, but I also think it's an element of, sort of throwing it back the other way and being like, oh well, yeah, Christians can be evil too.
I think in a way it is
the point they're trying to make
of an age of abundance, because the art, it's not art anymore. Art is dead in that sense.
Yeah.
And now they're trying to just be as controversial as possible, like they did it with. I was listening to Boogie 2988 on YouTube was talking about this. He was talking about how they try to be controversial now in games. Like, did you see Outlast 2? Outlast 2 was the same thing, but obviously
there was some anti-Christian thing going on there. There was like loads of biblical scripture being twisted, wasn't there, in the trailer?
One of the first things that happen is your wife gets raped by this cultist priest that's meant to be like an offshoot of Christianity, and like there's crosses and Virgin Marys all over the place in this game. And it's the same, as I say, it's going to be the same with Far Cry. Obviously, less of a horrific type of take on it. It's just people are trying to get really controversial because art is, we've done everything. There's nothing new under the sun, as Solomon says.
It's all about, I think, sinking negative connotations of Christianity into people's minds.
It's a tough one because despite what we hear, I mean, Christianity, biblical Christianity, was never really in the mainstream. Not really. Political
No.
Christianity was.
That was the point I was going to make about. I think it was you, Jake, said about like it's a bit silly considering most people in America identify as Christians. I think most of the quote unquote Christians in America aren't really going to be that bothered about the negative sort of things that it says about Christianity as long as it's a cool game, to be honest.
Yeah.
That's the impression I get about sort of the church in America, really, is that most of it is that kind of thing. It's like, it's like supposedly the highest consumption of pornography in America is in the Bible Belt. So,
Really?
yeah.
I didn't know that.
Apparently.
I mean, I'll be honest. I'm probably going to play Far Cry 5 because I am a fan of the series. But, I mean, I had to refrain from Outlast 2 because that was just... I mean, I was watching someone play it online and on YouTube. And it got to that scene with the rape scene. And I was like, this is... Like, I mean, what a precedent to be setting for the rest of the game. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like they tried to outdo the first game.
Yeah.
With just being uncomfortably awful.
Yeah, and then, I mean, of course it repulsed me even further for the sake of it, of what it was saying about, you know, the nature of the Bible and the faith that I hold to. The reason
the logo's got an upside down cross in it, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. The
In what? Sorry.
Outlast 2. Did you see that?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've seen that.
The
Well,
yeah.
Speaking of Christian culture, there's apparently the Case for Christ film is the highest rated Christian film ever, and that's just come out.
I
In
actually,
Outlast
So maybe
2.
there's some hope.
Is
Yeah.
that made by?
I'm not sure who it was made by. Oh,
It's made by Pureflix.
do you mean Outlast
Okay.
2 or The Case for Christ?
The Case for Christ.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, highly recommend that.
It was
Anyway, gang.
Lee Strobel, right?
Yeah, it's based it's the true story of Lee Strobel, how he became a Christian. The book. I highly recommend the film. Very challenging and good film. Anyway, shall we wrap this up?
Certainly.
Oh, go on. Who wants to host? Do you want me to flip a coin?
Well, for who's gonna? Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah. Always gone so silent. I'm assuming he's thinking like, no.
He's
Oh.
a deep prayer.
So what do you want? Heads or tails?
Tails.
Just tails.
Okie dokie.
All right. Same time and place. Thank you everybody for listening, and I really hope we just opened your mind. I hope we weren't too racist and bigoted and horrible. And like to share and subscribe. If you could tell us how we can make it better, that'd be really great to hear as well. Yeah. Thanks.
Ta-da.
Thank you very much.